So a few months ago, I published a series of about 5 hours worth of videos talking about filming board game content for YouTube in a small space. I talked about cameras and lighting and microphones and gadgets. No one watches those videos, but they are still available. They're also, in addition to being on YouTube, they're on Skillshare and Udemy. No one really cares, but for completeness sake, I've decided to record an update on some of the new gadgets that I've started to use since the recording of that course, that video course. And, half of why I'm doing this YouTube channel is just to play with the gadgets and think about how could this be done a little bit better, a little bit smoother. And I'm all about sort of streamlining the process. So today we're going to look at some of these new gadgets and a couple that you can't see, and just talk about whether it might be right for you if you're filming YouTube content. So we'll just go through these one at a time in no particular order. And I should say everything I'm going to show you I purchased with my own money. I don't have none of this is gifted or reviewed. And I have no arrangements with any of these companies. I won't get any money if you purchase any of them. And almost everything I'm talking about here is fairly generic. You could buy from any different brand. Most of the stuff I get, I try to buy used on eBay. All right, so we're going to start with an expensive one. This is a tripod head, so ignore the red thing. That's just one of many tripods. But today we're going to talk about this tripod head here. Now, if you watched my video course, you will know I'm a big fan of these Arca Swiss mounts. That's what this is. It's a standardization for mounting cameras, mostly. And you can see this tripod head has an Arca Swiss mount as well. This is a ball head. They come in lots of different flavors, but they all have the same mechanic where you can move it along any axis here. You can tilt it down, twist it sideways, and then you can lock it into place. That's the ball head part here, and it also has a separate lock to rotate on the tripod. Okay. And then the cameras mount right on this plate. The Arca Swiss makes it very easy to take a camera off, put it on, move it around. So that's what the Arca Swiss part is. And this camera head also has an Arca Swiss mount, so I can just put this on and lock it in. Okay. So what's different about this tripod head? Now, if you get into serious photography, you find out that you could pay $1,000 for a tripod head. Now, I'm not going to be spending $1,000 on any tripod head, but this tripod head is the most expensive I've ever purchased, and it's about $110 used, maybe new $160. And what's different about it? Well, two things. First of all, it's a three-way tripod head as opposed to a ball head, which means that each of the axes are independently controlled. So, well, before I show you, the other part that's not necessarily... You can get a three-way tripod head that's not geared. This one happens to be geared. The geared part is the thing that lets it move smoothly by turning a knob, rather than loosening and then moving it at will. So you can see I can change, if I put this here, I can change this axis, which tilts it left or right. So I've got fine grain control of this with this tripod head. This is a Benrose GD3WH, I believe it is. There's a way to use this knob to make quick changes manually, and then you can use, sorry, that's not there. Then you can use the knob, the gear, to make precise. Smooth is not the right word. You wouldn't use it for a panning shot, but for small changes. And then this gear here can go up or down. Now, why would you want a three-way geared tripod head? Well, the best way to explain why that's so important for me is to talk about the particular use case for board game content where I have, well, you don't need to see this, where I have an overhead camera. So my overhead camera is used to show a game board or whatever. Maybe I'll cut to a clip of it. If I'm playing on a small board, that board will be in front of me, for example. And if I'm playing on a large board, it might take up more of the table. And so what I need to be able to do for my overhead camera is change what the focus point is on the table, whether it's the center of the table or a space closer to me. In that case, I only want to change that one axis to make it tilt down or up. And in truth, sometimes I want to do the same with my front camera. I don't want to get it off level. I just want to tilt it down or up a little bit. Now for my front camera, it's a little easier. I can just put something under its front leg to tilt it up or down. But my overhead camera is considerably harder to adjust with a ball head, because once you loosen it, the whole thing starts moving. And you'd be surprised how difficult it is to get that top-down camera to not twist a little bit. It's especially hard because it's hanging above my head. It's on a beam that moves a little bit until it's stabilized. If you watch my video, you'll see about that. So the point is, it's very hard to get that top-down camera perfectly straight, even with the table and where I want it focused. It's really difficult. And once I get it, I don't ever want to mess with it. And so to be able to change where vertically on the table, whether it's centered at in the center of the table for a big board or closer to me for a small board, I don't want to mess with that. But now that I have this three-way geared head, I can just go and turn that one axis to tilt the camera a little bit down and a little bit up, and it stays level with the rest of the table. It really makes that quite a bit easier. Okay, next up we're going to talk about this little baby here, the Streamdeck XL, the Elgato Streamdeck XL. Now Elgato makes a bunch of these. This is the one I used up until very recently, a smaller one. It's wonderfully compact. It looks kind of ugly from the back. It's on a stand that I think came separate. I can't remember. They make a newer version that has a stand that looks closer to this, which is much more elegant. This is the big one. I think the small one's like $150, and this one might be $200 if you get it on sale. They also make a new one with some dials, which might be better if you're not better. Might be useful if you want to change volume adjustments and stuff. But I find that that's not something I want to do. And it turns out, I thought I'll just try this one and see if I really need the buttons. It's got a very nice system for designing these buttons, and you can make groups and stuff. So no matter what size you have, you can quickly access other groups. You customize them. The beauty about these is that you can customize the images and the text for all your buttons. You can customize these buttons. And I use this during live streams to control OBS, which is the software that I do live streams. And that lets me change between camera angles and do all sorts of things. But I thought this big one was going to be not worth the difference. But it turns out, for me, it's actually really helped to have so many more extra buttons. And the streamlined look of it and the fact that I can sort of hide the wire down here and you don't even see it means that it really doesn't take up too much extra space. Another reason why it doesn't take up too much extra space is when I had the small one, like you can see on this big one here, these buttons on the left-hand side are actually at a convenient place for me. And I've put this far enough in the corner that these ones on the right are a little bit less convenient. I sort of have to look over there. And when I was using the small one, I would put it like here so that I could see and have access to the stuff. So with this large one, I'm really not losing too much table space because I still have to put it out here to get access to these, but then the other buttons are there and visible, and I find out with a full page of buttons. So this one is 8 by 4, 32 buttons, and this one is 5 by 3, 15 buttons. So actually this one's considerably double, a little more than double the number of buttons. And with 32 buttons, I can actually get basically everything that I normally would use during a stream. I only have to go into a group for some extra stuff. You can see I can jump into some different groups. But boy, if you are live streaming and you haven't got one of these Stream Deck button systems or something similar, it makes a huge difference. And so I would now recommend just go for the big one. Future-proof yourself. Next up is a gadget that I use primarily on live streams, but you might use it in a non-live video if you're playing a game that uses a tablet. And that's a monitor arm, a swing away monitor arm. So here it is. I'll have to cut into another view so you can see it mounted on the table. But as you saw, I can easily swing it out of the way when I'm not using it in a scene, or swing it just barely in view and I can still access it. Or I can bring it right in front of me if it's something that I need to interact with. You can tilt it up or down. Obviously, you can change the height of it however you want. And actually, what I've got here is an arm. This is a monitor arm on eBay. I think probably the swinging arm costs about $70. But mounted on that now, I forget if this is two different things. I believe I did have to buy two separate things for this. This is a tablet holder, so the tablet can just snap in there. But then the other thing it lets me do is rotate it. Now this has been a huge benefit, because sometimes you play a game or want to show some piece of art or map where you need a landscape display. And then sometimes tablet orientation is much better. And you might not think that, but actually, if you think about live streaming, it turns out that the landscape orientation is perfect when you want to fill up the screen with the display. So if you want to show some full screen image on the display, having it landscape is perfect. But what I use even more commonly is a split screen where I'm on half and the tablet's on the other half. And for that, having it oriented in portrait orientation is exactly what you want. So being able to switch between the two, and that works fine when you stream the output of the tablet. You can see I've got the output here on a USB-C. This is going into my computer so it can capture the image of whatever I'm showing on the screen. And in my other gadget video, I talked about how what I've got between the tablet and the computer is actually a combination HDMI converter and charger. So I can leave it charged all the time while it's processing the video. So if I go for 6 hours, it's fine. And this tablet holder doesn't block the camera, so you can still take camera shots. And in fact, sometimes just for fun, if we're filming, I'll just turn the camera on and so you can see another part of my room, the cat or whatever. This arm and the fact that it gets out of the way so easily has turned out to be a real great addition to my live streaming gadgets. the next gadget I'm going to show you. And remember, these are all just the new gadgets. If you want to watch the old gadgets that I've been using for a long time, you'll have to find my video course series and find the video on gadgets. What we've got new here is just this white part. I've got these both mounted on a 3D printed tray for convenience. But what this is an wireless outlet switch. So I've got 5 outlets in the room that are controlled by this one switch that control 4 separate lights, 2 that face me from the left and right, 2 in the background, and 1 this blue LED bookshelf light that I otherwise sometimes forget to turn on. So this helps me remember to turn everything on and makes it much easier for me to get started. I don't have to walk around to the different lights and turn them on. So you can see I can push one button to turn everything off, and then one button to turn everything on. Although sometimes these front 2 lights can act up a little bit and take a couple more pushes to work if you just turn it off and on at the same time. But anything that can save you a bunch of time for starting up and tearing down and keep everything consistent is a big win. And this is one of my favorite little additions to my arsenal of gadgets here. Next up is something quite simple. This is a Logitech M720 mouse. It's probably about $25. And of course, you're all familiar with what a mouse is and what it does, but this one's a little different. Of course, there are a bunch of mice that have this feature, but you'll see here, it's got 3 numbers, 1, 2, 3, and a little button here. And it actually comes with a keyboard as well you could get that has the same effect, has 3 numbers. And what you can do is have it switch between devices. So this is actually very useful for me because most of the time, I use this when I'm live streaming. Most of the time, I don't have to interact with the live streaming software, that's OBS, to do things on screen. But I do occasionally want to use the mouse to interact with the tablet, especially because I can swing it out of the way, show it on the screen. I don't even have to touch it or look at it, and I could sometimes use a keyboard. But occasionally I'll want to be able to switch and do something with OBS, which is on my computer on a separate screen. And the ability to switch between those devices on the fly to quickly change what device I'm interacting with saves me from having to have multiple mice and juggle them around and try to remember which goes to which. So it's small, it's cheap, and if you're dealing with tablet and desktop, it can be a time saver. Continuing with the mouse and keyboard theme, here I have the smallest usable keyboard I could find, small and thin, with dedicated cursor and page buttons. And here I've mounted it to a little rail that can sit on the side of my table. And this doesn't get used often, but occasionally I'll play a game, a live game on the channel that requires me to interact with the tablet, type things in, and having a full-size keyboard gets in the way of the board game space, of the materials in the board. If you were playing a computer game, you would be sitting at your desk with your full-size keyboard. This is not as comfortable as a full-size keyboard. But the combination of small size and then mounted on the table so it doesn't take up any desktop space, but it could also be just put on the table like this. And cheap, probably 30 bucks or so. It's a nice alternative to having a full-size keyboard. Okay, next I have for you a remote shutter control. This is fairly common in photography, but not used or known so much for people who are recording videos. You wouldn't use this when you're recording live, streaming live, but if you're filming a series of videos where you want to pause and stop the recording, maybe you want to record 10 segments. For me, I've got my front camera, which is, several feet away. And I've also got an overhead camera. And frequently if I'm filming, let's say I'm filming a lecture or a little series of 10 videos and I want to pause it between takes, between videos. Well, it's important for me, ideally, both cameras get paused about the same time and restarted at about the same time so that I can match up those pairs of videos from the different cameras. And I'd rather not have to get up, walk around, hit pause, risk moving the camera a little bit, or, you know, just disturbing my workflow. So basically this plugs into the camera, this part, and you turn it on. And you can get this kind of thing for all of the major brands. I use a Panasonic Lumix camera, so that's what this model is for. This plugs into the camera, and then you've got a little button here that you can start and stop recording. And the nice thing is that this particular model, this is a Eudolon Pebble receiver it's called, this particular model will let you program one transmitter for multiple receivers. So what I do is I've got two of these. One goes on my front camera, one goes on my top-down camera. And so with one push of this button, both cameras start and stop recording. So if I want to record 10 different sessions, I just push this, both cameras turn on, record my session, push it, both cameras, they don't turn off, they pause the recording, and then push it again to restart. It's a great way of filming multiple sequences and keeping both cameras relatively in sync. You'd still have to sync them up, the audio and video, in your video editor to get the perfectly frame precise matchups. But it's a great way of not forgetting to turn one on, forgetting to turn one off, or starting one 10 minutes before the other, etc. I think these are about $30 each, something like that. Okay, one of the last things I'm going to show you here is a little tablet holder arm and foot pedal. And occasionally I'll record a video. Most of the videos I just speak into the camera. But sometimes if I'm giving a long sort of lecture style video where I've made some slides on Google Slides or whatever, maybe 15, 20 slides, and I want to step through them and look at them so that I can remember what I wanted to say for each section of a lecture, for example. They're not fully scripted, so I'm not reading from the screen. If you really wanted to read from a screen, have a script, and really have it look natural, then some sort of teleprompter sitting in front of the camera. It's a pain to do, and it's a hassle, and it is hard to set up properly so you can see it and tear down. So instead, I find the next best thing is a little arm that will hold the tablet. You can see this is where the tablet goes. You can just untighten this, put a tablet right in here. I've got this mounted so it sits right above the camera lens. So the bottom of this tablet display is right above the camera lens so that when I'm looking, this is where I'm looking when I'm reading from the tablet. And I find it's less distracting. First of all, even a small deviation from looking at the center of the lens is detectable. So it's not perfect. You don't want to be reading from it the whole time. But a little bit above the lens seems to be the least distracting. Like if it's below the lens, if I'm looking down a foot, that you notice that's distracting. A little bit above is not so bad. Sometimes if it's something that I'm not going to refer to very often at all, I might the easier thing would be just put the tablet on the table a little bit in front of the outside of view. But if I'm really going to look quite a bit, this is the best thing. So I have this is an Arca Swiss mount. So I've got a mount sort of on the wall behind the camera. So whenever I rarely want to film such an episode, I basically just plop this in the little tripod holder I've got, and it's already configured with the arm. These are, 3 different things you see here. You're seeing like an arm, then a tripod head ball joint, and then a tablet holder, and you might add this Arca Swiss plate as the 4th thing. But you can see this arm can be adjusted, but once it's adjusted now, I just leave everything as it is. I just pop it right in, to the wall behind the camera, and it's positioned exactly perfectly for me to just slot in the tablet to read from. And then the other piece of that puzzle is a little foot pedal. It's connected by Bluetooth. This is probably 40 bucks or so. And it lets you use your feet to advance a slide forward and back. And that's a way that I can just go through all of those slides, just triggering them ahead without having to distract my hands to do it, and move through the sections or the slides or the pages of a Google Docs. If you are going to follow along with some outline that you've written, a setup like this is a fairly affordable, close to teleprompter solution. So the last thing I'm going to show you is just some 3D printed rail sliders with magnets. So we use these little trays for game board pieces on the table, tokens and stuff. And most of the time that works great. That's exactly what you want. You want to put these things on the table, like I've got a little holder here for pens and stickers. But occasionally I'll be playing with something where I really need that table real estate. These are all 3D printed. You can customize the size of everything. So what I've got here are these little rails that can go, on the side of the table and slide, or you could imagine anywhere really. And then everything else, these are all magnetized, so when they're not sitting on the table, they can just go and get moved to one of the rails. They're quite strong on there. And I can swap out, okay, instead of this, we'll put this. And it's on there pretty good. And it just lets me, when I need to have all the table space free, but still have these things within reach. Simple if you have a 3D printer, but just an idea if you've got a table with a rail, maximizing that space right on the edge of the table can be useful for those big table hog games. So there you have it, an update on some of the latest gadgets that I've been playing with. If you know of a gadget that I haven't thought of, I would love to hear it. Anything that makes life a little bit easier, a little more filled with joy, the joy of interacting with technology and finding a tool that does its job well, please let me know in the comments. Note that I haven't talked about any of the software tools and extensions and plugins that I've written or third-party tools that I use. That will have to wait for another video. And you might want to check out my course on Micro Studio board game YouTube production if this is the kind of thing that interests you, if you think you might want to start working on a YouTube channel, or maybe you've been working on one for a while and you've sort of lost the fun of playing with some of these options and settings and gadgets. Do let me know if you find that course useful, and I'll see you on the next video.